Labor has recorded its best news poll since the last election, as the honeymoon between Kevin Rudd and voters continues. Tomorrow marks a fortnight since Julia Gillard's demise, and with Labor now competitive, it's little wonder even Mr Rudd's former enemies are singing his praises. Still, Tony Abbott continues to push the Prime Minister to have an election sooner rather than later, as the opposition leader continues to deal with questions about his travel expenses. Political correspondent Tommy has more from Canberra.
A fortnight ago, the coalition could almost smell victory. Now the taste of defeat is becoming a real possibility. Labor's primary votes risen 9% since the resurrection of Kevin Rudd. After preferences, an election held today would be a dead heat. The most dramatic turnaround's been in preferred Prime Minister, where Mr Rudd is smashing Tony Abbott by more than 20 points.
What's your reaction to the polls out today?
You may find this strange, but I have not read them.
I was wondering when someone might ask me about that.
The opposition leader did read them and seized on numbers showing a voter preference for a September election to attack Kevin Rudd.
We know you're frightened of the caucus, but don't be scared of the Australian people. Name the date, bring it on.
I hope Mr Rudd is emboldened by these polls to go to the Governor-General and call an election.
The coalition's now facing questions about the polls that used to be asked of Labor.
Any concerns about how Tony Abbott is faring against Kevin Rudd in terms of the Irish things?
Look, Tony Abbott has done a magnificent job as opposition leader.
Mr Abbott's come under scrutiny after revelations he paid back almost $10,000 in flights to promote his book in 2009. His office mistakenly booked the flights for parliamentary business. Mr Abbott's blaming Kevin Rudd for driving the story.
But he called for a kinder, gentler polity, and he called for positive politics. Now we've got the Labor Party spinning this kind of stuff. Now let's move on.
It's not Labor Party, it's an independent website.
Let's move on. Let's move on.
Former Speaker Peter Slipper still hasn't moved on from allegations about his travel expenses. His staff tweeting today, Abbott's amount was $9,400 and he has been let off, while Peter has been charged with an amount of about a tenth this. Is this equitable? Another tweet added, we are mystified why T. Abbott is given preferential treatment. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister's defending his decision to give preferential treatment to Labor's rank and file when it comes to choosing the party's leader.
This is the most democratic reform that the Labor Party has had in 120 years.
Even recent enemies are applauding the thrust of the idea that had watered down the power of Labor's factions.
I think it'll also address the fundamental cause of instability, which on occasions has been the behaviour of caucus members towards each other. And I have to say that on occasions I have been at fault in that regard.
Even one of Labor's so-called faceless men is uniting behind Kevin Rudd and admitting he made mistakes in the process of removing him in 2010.
Well, you know, appearing on Lateline, trying to communicate publicly our views. We should have been a bit more faceless, to be honest.
But one senior Labor figure's challenging the Prime Minister's move to change the caucus rules, which the party room will vote on later this month.
The Prime Minister and those caucus members are just one voting party member, and the party itself makes the decisions about how rules vary.
But campaigning in Darwin, Kevin Rudd is doing his best to put Labor's divisions behind it. He's announced he won't reverse Julia Gillard's decision to force the retirement of his close ally Trish Crossan to replace her with Indigenous former athlete Nova Peris.
We have an election due in several months' time, and therefore we've got to get on with the business of uniting behind our Labor candidates.
There was also some news on the policy front, with Tasmania signing up to the government's Gonski school funding deal. Now just Queensland, Victoria, Western Australia and the Northern Territory remain. Tonight the Prime Minister's been in discussions with the Territory's Chief Minister in Darwin. Tom Iggleton, Lateline.